So in this segment, we're going to be covering a little clip here, and do you know what made me? Yeah, clearly, this man Mark Crothers, he does a bang up job of kind of holding the DUP accountable for this, and he's just tired of their nonsense, and I've got to respect him. I've got to respect him because he just doesn't care. Normally the BBC hosts are really wishy washy, but this man's just handing out fatalities in this clip.
The point is that you think the protocol is more important than driving forward the reform you say needs to be relentlessly implemented, and you don't see a contradiction in that position.
Well, when I meet with medical practitioners and they say to me, we're really concerned about the movement of drugs across from Great Britain into Northern Ireland because of the implications of the protocol, I think everyone should be concerned about how...
Yeah, and not having an executive helps, does it?
Oh, I would much rather we have an executive.
You could have one next week.
I will.
And what they could do? What they could do is they could have the executive set up, and the executive could push these points to the British government and to the EU, and they could see if the EU could make exceptions here, which they have done already for medication. They've offered one until, I think, the end of 2025.
Want to get an executive, and if we can get the barriers removed, then we'll have an executive next week. That responsibility lies with the UK government and the European Union.
No, it relies with the DUP, who've taken a political decision not to have Stormont working at the moment under the current circumstances, because you think that the issues of concern to you are more important than anybody else's issues, including health.
No.
Boom, there it is. He said you could have an executive tomorrow and you could solve the issues with health, but you are choosing to make a stand here. This is a political decision by the DUP. It's absolutely correct.
Health is a top priority for the DUP.
It's not your top priority. The protocol is clearly your top priority.
Well, if you want to go back and talk about the protocol rather than health tonight, I'm quite happy to do that.
I'm just making the point. I'm making the point that for you, the protocol is more important. Otherwise, you'd be in government doing the job you're being paid to do.
You see, you're making it out as though it's protocol or health.
But it is protocol or health.
They're connected. I appreciate you don't understand that.
Well, no, it's not a question of not understanding. I mean, I don't try that line. I think we understand the reality. You've made a political decision, a calculation, that the protocol is more important, and that's why the other parties aren't able to be at Stormont, and why we don't have a health minister, and why you aren't sitting on a health committee.
No, well,
I'm not sure if all the other parties are represented here, all the major ones, but it's quite an interesting setup they've got here.
Why we don't have a health minister, and why you aren't sitting on a health committee.
No, well, we should have that. And New Decade, New Approach made commitments over 3 years ago. Over 3 years ago to deal with the very issues that have caused the collapse of the...
I mean, I don't try that line. I think we...
This is it. Sorry, this is it. Just this glorious stuff here. When Paul Given tries to kind of bullet him.
But it is protocol or health.
They're connected. I appreciate you don't understand that.
Well, no, it's not a question of not understanding. I mean, I don't try that line. I think we understand the reality. You've made a political decision, a calculation, that the protocol is more important, and that's why the other parties aren't able to be at Stormont, and why we don't have a health minister, and why you aren't sitting on a health committee.
No, that's it, isn't it? They put the protocol over everything else, because he's even admitted that the protocol is an issue between the United Kingdom government, with the Westminster government and the EU. So there's nothing Stormont can do. There's nothing the DUP can do here. So they've decided to take a stand by keeping Stormont closed, in the hopes that it would pressure the UK into giving in to their demands over the protocol, which is just not going to happen. And so that's what they've done here. They've put the protocol over health, the protocol over everything else. I think there are farmers missing out on certain payments, in terms of subsidies, amongst other things. You've got people in Northern Ireland not receiving the funds they should be receiving from the Westminster government, which is very low on the energy crisis. But yeah, you got to give some respect here on Mark Crothers' name here. Yeah, genuinely great stuff here. I'll drop him a follow just for that, because this is the second clip of his I think I've covered from his show, and he's just a no-nonsense character, and this is what I want to see from the BBC. Just be objective to the facts. The DUP have put the protocol over health. How can you prove that? If they cared about health, they would be in Stormont. They would be in Stormont. The executive would be set up, and they'd be looking at ways to resolve any of the problems that the protocol is causing regarding pharmaceuticals. Which, as I said, the EU have given an extension over that, so that's something they could be pushing for in Stormont. Some sort of exceptions for medicines and other things. But he's not doing it. Yeah, sure. He could argue that it's because of the protocol they have these issues with regards to medication or getting drugs in from the GB to NI. But the fact is, they could try and look at importing those medications from other EU member states. There are different solutions here, but the DUP have chosen not to do them. But the simple fact is, if he wanted to do his job properly, if he was there to represent the people of Northern Ireland, he'd be there in Stormont doing his job, not sat out on the sidelines throwing a tantrum. Because the simple fact is, I don't know where this ends, because the DUP will not be given what they want. by Rishi Sunak. The checks will be cut down significantly, but they will not be given what they want, especially with regards to other aspects of the protocol that they're against. It's just not going to happen. And if you want to look at the real actual consequences of this, you got failure to debate Dethai's law. I'm not sure how to pronounce that, as DUP refuses to support speaker nomination. So you have a situation where Sinn Féin had secured the recall to debate and pass Dai's law in honour of a 6-year-old West Belfast boy who's awaiting a heart transplant and is present at today's recall. The law would mean every adult in Northern Ireland would be considered to be potential organ donors after death unless they specifically state otherwise. So essentially an opt-out. You'd have to opt out of being an organ donor. The DUP have boycotted the power sharing for over a year. So this is the real terms consequence of doing stuff like this, of boycotting your parliament or your assembly. You can't get bills passed, and what that means is people suffer because of it. So the DUP, you can argue the DUP have put the protocol above this boy here, put the protocol above the people in Northern Ireland who are suffering from organ related problems. And they could have done this temporarily. The DUP has refused the nomination of a speaker at a recall petition, so they could have done this temporarily. They could have allowed a speaker, and they could have collapsed Stormont again if they really wanted to, and that would have given them more headlines of, in this case we did the right thing because certain things are above politics, including this boy here. But the DUP are that dogmatic that they're willing to stick with this line, and they are happy to put the protocol over the lives of people in Northern Ireland. And it's just tragic, absolutely tragic, that the DUP have done this. And if I was a unionist voter in Northern Ireland, which I'm not, I don't really care much for the union, I'll be honest, I'd be contemplating how much is it worth it? How much are you willing to sacrifice to try and get rid of the Northern Ireland Protocol when you have no chance even of doing it? Anyways, Paul, it's a given, mate. You've made a complete mess of this, and you've decided to try and treat the host like an idiot by saying you might not understand, you absolute mug. But anyways, I'm going to leave it there. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, comment, share, subscribe, support the channel on Patreon if you can, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one.